My name is Becca Harlan. I am 33 years old and a senior data analyst at Pacific Northwest Asset Management. My colleagues call me the Oracle. I am the one who looks at a chaotic sea of data and finds the one hard, true thing. I manage risk. I build predictive models. My projections on real estate trends and community investments move markets and make fortunes for our clients. In my corner office overlooking the bay, I am precise, respected, and in control. Tonight at the Cedar Grove Estates Clubhouse during the annual Harmony Gala, I was none of those things. The Oregon rain hammered against the tall windows of the private event room. The clubhouse was the kind of place that prided itself on discreet luxury, which meant the carpets were so thick they absorbed all sound. The lighting was dim enough to hide the wrinkles in the old money residence, and the air was heavy with the scent of beeswax candles and grilled steaks. I stood at the heavy frosted glass door for a full minute, my breath fogging a small patch at eye level. My hand was clenched around the small velvet-wrapped box in my coat pocket. It was not just a gift. It was a vintage 1951 community clock I had spent nearly 3 months tracking down and restoring myself. Tweezers under a magnifying lamp, cleaning the delicate gears, sourcing a new mainspring from Switzerland, fixing things, restoring value to what was broken. It was the kind of complex tangible problem I excelled at. It was the antithesis of the Cedar Grove HOA. Through the distorted glass, I saw the scene waiting for me, the lions in their den. Karen Langley, the HOA president, sat at the head of the long polished table. Her silver blonde hair was perfect, her spine rigid as a steel rod. She was turned slightly, holding a wine glass, but her eyes were scanning the room, auditing every server, every place setting. She was a general surveying a battlefield she had already won. To her left, board member Blake, 40 and still finding himself, nursed a whiskey. That familiar lazy smirk was fixed on his face. He was laughing at something Karen said, but his eyes were restless. He caught my silhouette in the glass, and the smirk widened, shifting into that specific expression of anticipatory greed that always preceded a request for another emergency assessment. On the other side, Todd, the younger board member at 26, was illuminated by the blue light of his phone. His thumbs were a blur. He was completely disengaged, a physical void at the table. Unless money was explicitly mentioned, he represented the casual, draining entitlement of the new generation. Then I saw Robert, the longtime treasurer and the man everyone quietly respected, at the other end near the fireplace listening politely to one of his golf buddies. He looked tired, but he stood as I finally pushed the heavy door open. The manufactured warmth of the room and the low hum of conversation washed over me. The noise level dipped just a fraction as all eyes turned to the late arrival. Robert's smile was the only genuine article in the entire establishment. He moved around the table, navigating the obstacle course of his own board, and wrapped me in a hug. He smelled of expensive cologne, cedar, and the thousands of silent concessions he had made over the years to keep the peace with Karen. He was the reason I kept showing up. He was the captive I kept trying and failing to rescue. "You're late, Becca." Karen's voice cut across the room. It was not a greeting. It was an accusation, a demerit. "The traffic from the city was terrible," I murmured, sliding out of my damp coat. "Happy anniversary to the community, Robert." "Thank you for coming, Becca," he said, squeezing my arm before Karen's gaze pulled him back to the table. I moved to the empty chair I assumed was mine. Of course, it was at the far end of the long mahogany table, strategically placed next to a rattling air conditioning vent and furthest from Robert. I was geographically isolated, the message as clear as if it were engraved on the heavy silver cutlery. The respected residence guest, seated like an inconvenient +1. Blake and Todd flanked Karen, the loyal lieutenants, the enforcers. A waiter, young and nervous, approached immediately. Ms. Harlan, would you care for a drink? Karen cut in from the head of the table. Her voice was light, sociable, but it was an order. She'll have the house white. She doesn't know the difference anyway. Just something sweet. The waiter paused, caught in the crossfire, looking at me. The old Becca, the one from 8 years ago, would have nodded, her face burning, just to avoid the friction. She would have accepted the narrative that she was unsophisticated, clueless. But the analyst who managed a $9 million portfolio, the woman who advised CEOs on market entry, looked the waiter calmly in the eye. I'll have a glass of the Ellerman Cabernet, please. The 2019 if you have it. Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. It was a tiny defiance, but in this neighborhood it was a gunshot. The waiter, visibly relieved to have a clear directive, nodded. An excellent choice, ma'am. Right away. My goodness. Blake chuckled into his glass loud enough to draw attention. Someone's feeling expensive tonight. Market treating you well. Becca, there it was. The probe. The first exploratory drill to see if the oil well was full. It's a volatile market. Blake, I said evenly. When you don't have kids or a husband to spend it on, I suppose you can afford any wine you want, Karen said. She smiled as she said it, addressing the table, making it a piece of light social observation. But it was the familiar scalpel, precise and deep, aimed right at the ribs. The implication my success was a compensation for my failure as a woman. My empty ring finger was not a choice. It was a tragedy that conveniently for them resulted in a surplus of disposable income. My independence was not strength. It was a resource pool they had collectively laid claim to. I ignored the comment, turning to Robert. How was the golf game today? Robert, he started to answer. Something about the 9th hole, but Karen cut him off. Robert, tell them about the clubhouse membership assessment. And just like that, the focus shifted to money. Not my money. Not yet. But the topic was now open. I sipped my ice water. The crystal clinking. The sound transported me. A sharp auditory memory. 8 years ago. I was 24. 6 months into my analyst program at Pacific Northwest. I had just received my first significant bonus. $14,500. I was planning a trip to Costa Rica, the first real vacation I would have paid for myself. I had the backpack and the hiking boots sitting in my tiny apartment. Then the certified letter came. It was Karen. Her voice on the follow-up call, a theatrical performance of manufactured panic. The community roof, the emergency assessment, penalty, an oversight, some confusing paperwork Robert had supposedly messed up. They were going to lose the clubhouse. She had cried. The bank was seizing it on Monday. I remember the cold metallic taste of fear in my mouth. I remember the smell of stale coffee in my apartment as I sat at my laptop. My vacation plans evaporating. I remember canceling the trip. I remember transferring $12,400, nearly all of it, feeling sick to my stomach, but also proud I had saved them. I was the responsible one, the rescuer. It was only years later I realized the penalty was just their regular maintenance bill they had not bothered to budget for. That was the first rescue. It was followed by the emergency pool resurfacing for the neighborhood, which turned out to be an elective upgrade for Karen's personal backyard. Then Blake's can't-miss landscaping startup opportunity, which vanished in 3 months along with $20,000 of my money funneled through a community donation. Then Todd's tuition twice for a community college degree he never finished because he was not feeling the vibe. I looked across the table. Blake was watching me, no longer smirking, but calculating. Todd had finally put his phone down, his eyes glazed with boredom, waiting for the food. Karen was holding court, telling a story about a neighbor's gaudy lawn decorations, making Robert laugh his beautiful, Then laugh. They were waiting. The party, the gifts, the polite applause. It was all just the prelude to the ask. My quarterly bonus was set to post in 2 weeks. They knew it just as surely as I did. I ran the numbers in my head. The analyst in me could not help it. The compounding interest on those loans, the opportunity cost, the down payment on a condo I never bought, the relationships that withered because I was always on call, always canceling, always drained by their manufactured crisis. I set the water glass down with a quiet click. The velvet box in my purse suddenly felt heavier. Tonight, I decided, would be different. The realization settled over me, not as a hot flash of anger, but as a cold, hard certainty. The market had corrected. The risk profile had changed. I did not know how I was going to do it. I had not prepared the legal documents. I had not rehearsed a speech. But the exhaustion had finally breached the levees of guilt. The analyst had taken over. The rescuer was off the clock. So Becca, Karen said, her voice slicing through my thoughts, her smile like polished marble as she turned her full attention to me. Tell us all about your important work. Still playing with other people's money all day. The Cabernet arrived. The waiter poured the deep red liquid. I picked up the glass, inhaled the scent of oak and dark cherry, and met her gaze over the rim. Something like that, Karen. I took a slow sip. It was excellent, and I knew the difference. The Cabernet was perfect, dry, complex, with a finish that tasted like dark cherries and perhaps a small, satisfying hint of irony. Karen's jab about me playing with other people's money hung in the air. But the only person at this table who truly understood that concept was me. I was the one who had been funding their endless, volatile, high-risk community emergencies for nearly a decade. The waiter set down a platter of baked brie with fig jam. The clinking of the small silver serving knife against the porcelain was sharp, and it cut straight through the pleasant buzz of the wine, pulling me backward. It was always a clink, a call, a crisis. My memory is not emotional. It is transactional. It is a ledger. The first major withdrawal after the initial roof rescue was for the pool crisis. I was 25. I was in a quarterly review meeting when my phone buzzed again and again. Karen. I finally excused myself, my heart pounding, convinced something terrible had happened. It's the pool. Becca. The lining is failing. The kids could be in danger. She had wept into the phone. A calculated, brittle hysteria. The contractor is wonderful. The best. But they need a payment guarantee before they'll schedule the work. $32,000. I didn't have it in savings. Not all of it. I had to liquidate a portion of my fledgling retirement fund. I took the 10% early withdrawal penalty. I wired the money. My hand shaking so hard I had to type the routing number twice. I felt the familiar toxic mix of panic and pride. I was the savior. I was the one who could make it right. This is the last time, Karen had whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. We'll be stable after this. Promise. Robert is so proud of you. I found the billing statement 6 months later, tucked into the clubhouse files while looking for a misplaced set of keys. The procedure code wasn't for an emergency resurfacing. It was elective, an upgrade to a heated tile deck for Karen's personal entertaining. The contractor wasn't the best. He was just the one affiliated with her golf club. Then came Blake's landscaping venture. He was 38 and brimming with an idea that was even for him uniquely stupid. An artisanal garden service combined with a premium mulch delivery business. It's huge in Austin, Becca. He'd insisted over a dinner I paid for. We get in on the ground floor here in Oregon. It's a license to print money for the community. He needed $20,000 for the initial equipment lease and permits. I said no for a week. I said no. Then Karen stepped in. He just needs a start. Becca, she'd said, catching me after work. her tone reasonable and soft. You got your start. You're so successful. Don't you want the neighborhood to succeed? It's tearing Robert apart to see the community so neglected. The implication was clear. My success was a weapon I was using against my own neighborhood. My refusal was cruelty. I wired the money. I'll pay you back with interest. Becca, Blake promised, clapping me on the shoulder. First-year profits. I swear. The business, predictably named Mulch Holes, folded in 6 months after 2 separate insurance claims and a scathing review from the health department. I never saw a dime. The first-year profits were non-existent. Todd's needs were smaller but more frequent, like a leaky faucet draining the reservoir. Hey Becca, the community college aid fell through, he'd text. Just need $8,000 for the semester. I'm really going to focus this time. I paid it. He dropped out. Hey Becca, my car died. Can't get to my new job, which required another $3,000. He lost the job a month later. Each crisis, each transfer was wrapped in the same packaging. A desperate, time-sensitive emergency followed by a tearful, ironclad promise of change. We'll start budgeting. We're cutting back. This is the very last time. They were lies. All of them. They were the fraudulent prospectus for a failing entity. And I was the sole investor, throwing good money after bad, blinded by the ticker symbol community. The cost wasn't just financial. The deepest cut had nothing to do with my bank account. His name was Ethan Cole. Ethan was an architect. He was logical, kind, and he saw the world in terms of sustainable structures. He was the first person who saw the rot in my neighborhood's foundation. You're not supporting them, Becca, he told me once, his hands over mine at a small Italian restaurant. We were supposed to be celebrating my promotion to senior analyst. Instead, I was distracted, checking my phone because Todd had lost his wallet again. You're feeding them with guilt, Ethan said. It's their primary source of nutrition. You're enabling them. You don't understand. I shot back, defensive and ashamed. It's my community. It's complicated. It's not complicated, he said, his eyes clear and sad. It's a pattern, and you're the one paying for it. The end came on our 3-year anniversary. I had reservations at Aurelia, the best restaurant in town, a 6-course tasting menu, a non-refundable deposit I'd already paid. I was getting dressed when my phone rang. Blake, an emergency. Becca, a real one. He was in Seattle. His wallet had been stolen. He was stranded. He needed $500 for a bus ticket home and a hotel room. His voice was pitched with just the right amount of panic. Ethan stood in the doorway of the bedroom watching me. He didn't say a word. He just watched as I paused, sighed, and reached for my laptop. He watched as I canceled the reservation, losing the deposit. He watched as I opened my banking app. Becca, he said, and his voice was very quiet. Don't. He's stranded. Becca, he's a 40-year-old man. He's lying. I can't take that chance. I hit send. The $500 vanished from my account. Ethan nodded. A slow final acknowledgement. It was never about the 500, was it? He asked. It's about the fact that he is always urgent and we are never important. He moved out 3 days later. The relationship, the only healthy, stable thing I had built for myself, couldn't compete with the gravitational pull of their manufactured crisis. I found out a month later through a stray comment from Robert that Blake had never been to Seattle. He had been at a high-stakes poker game in Portland and needed to cover his losses before Karen found out. I never got the 500 back. Karen was the architect of this entire system in front of Robert. She was the loving, slightly stressed matriarch. Becca is so generous, Robert. She's a good neighbor. She takes care of us. She would beam at me, creating the illusion of a happy, supportive unit. But in private, Her tactics were different. The phone calls, the texts, the whispers when Robert was out of the room. After all we did for you, Becca, it would kill Robert to know how much we're struggling. You can't tell him. Don't be selfish. A woman your age with your income. It's the least you can do. It was emotional blackmail perfected to an art form. Public praise for my generosity. Private shaming to ensure it continued. About 3 years ago, the analyst in me finally staged a quiet rebellion. I opened a new Excel file on my secure work drive. I named it Cedar Grove Expense Ledger.xlsx. I created columns. Date, amount, recipient, stated reason, actual outcome. I spent a weekend combing through 8 years of bank statements. June 2017. Blake, $15,500. Urgent landscaping repair. Outcome. New tattoo. Music festival. August 2018. Karen, $4,000. Roof miscalculation. Outcome. Regular maintenance bill. December 2019. Todd, $2,200. Security deposit for community hall. Outcome. Never moved in. March 2020. Robert, $32,000. Emergency pool resurfacing. Outcome. Elective heated deck for Karen's parties. October 2021. Blake, $20,000. Mulch startup. Outcome. Business failure. Total loss. The file was immaculate. Every transfer was categorized. Every lie documented. There was one cell I never touched.
J52.
The cell with the formula equals sum, J2, J51. I stared at it often, my cursor hovering over the enter key, but I never pressed it. I was terrified that seeing the final number, the hard data of my own exploitation, would be enough to stop my heart. This wasn't just a personal failure. It was a professional one. Last year, I was the lead analyst on the North Bridge acquisition, a massive complex merger in the sustainable forestry sector. It was my baby. I had sourced the deal, run the valuation models, and spent months on due diligence. It was my path to a partner track. The final decisive presentation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Seattle with the entire executive board. On Monday afternoon, Karen called hysterical. Todd had been arrested. A DUI. You have to come home, Becca. Now, you're the only one who can talk to the lawyers. We need bail. Robert is a wreck. I explained the meeting. She didn't care. Community comes first, Becca. Or does it? I drove 3 hours south back to Cedar Grove. My stomach in knots. I missed the meeting. My junior analyst Mark had to present my models. He did fine, but it wasn't my presentation. He didn't know the nuances. The partners were impressed by his poise under pressure. They gave the lead on the integration project to him. My big win became his breakout opportunity. I arrived at the jail to find the truth. It wasn't a DUI. Todd had been cited for shoplifting a video game. He had escalated the situation with the police, and an old unpaid parking ticket had triggered a bench warrant. The bail was $400. My boss, David, had been sympathetic, but his eyes were disappointed. You're reliable, Becca, he'd said, until you're not. Your neighborhood situation seems volatile. My colleagues at Pacific Northwest had a nickname for me, the problem solver. They meant it as a compliment. Give it to Harlan. She'll handle it. Becca can fix anything. They saw the result. The calm solution. The averted crisis. They didn't see the cost. They didn't see the canceled anniversaries. The missed presentations. The nights spent staring at a spreadsheet I was too afraid to finalize. They were praising my exhaustion. They were applauding my trauma response. A waiter's voice broke the memory. More wine. MS. Harlan. I looked at the bottle of Cabernet. Blake, who was now telling aloud. Boring story about a bad golf swing. Todd, who was back on his phone. Karen, who was watching me with that expectant, proprietary smile. The thought, which had been a whisper for months, finally spoke clearly. If I am a bank, the thought went, cold and clean as a line of code. If I am the Bank of Becca, the institution they all draw from, the lender of last resort, then I have the right to review the account. I have the right to set the terms, and I have the right to close the branch. The main courses, a symphony of roasted duck and pan-seared salmon, had been cleared away. The polite hum of conversation, fueled by expensive wine, filled the room. Robert was telling a story about a recent golf trip, and the table was relaxed. Then Karen, my HOA president, tapped her crystal wine glass with a dessert fork. The clear, high-pitched ring sliced through the ambience. If I could have everyone's attention, she announced, beaming. Robert, darling, it is time for your presentation. A ripple of polite, anticipatory applause. This was the main event. Blake, ever the showman, went first. He retrieved a large, garishly wrapped box from under a side table. It was wrapped in paper from a discount sporting goods store. Happy anniversary to the community, Robert. For the grill master. Robert dutifully unwrapped it. Inside was a 20-piece stainless steel barbecue set. The metal was thin. The plastic handles looked cheap. The tongs looked like they would buckle under the weight of a single chicken breast. It was the kind of gift you buy at a gas station on the way to the party. Wonderful, Blake, Robert said, manufacturing enthusiasm. Thank you. We will certainly put this to good use this summer. The thin, obligatory wave of applause moved through the guests. They knew a low-effort gift when they saw one. Todd, honey, your turn, Karen prompted. Todd, my younger bored ally, did not even get up. He had been staring at his phone for the last 20 minutes. His thumbs a blur. Oh, yeah. Happy anniversary, Robert. He tapped his screen a few times, then held it up. I just posted a new pic of us to the community Instagram. Tagged you and everything. It's already got 40 likes. Robert squinted at the small screen from across the table. I could see it from my angle. It was a selfie Todd had taken while Robert was talking to someone else. His face out of focus and turned away. Todd was in the foreground doing a peace sign, his expression bored. The caption read, Anniversary vibes with the old man. Legend. Oh, Todd. That's so modern, Karen gushed, clapping her hands. What a sweet, permanent memory. Another even weaker round of applause. A few of Robert's friends looked at each other with barely concealed pity. Becca, Karen's gaze swung to me. I assume you brought something for the community. Her tone was a challenge, implying that in my high-powered, busy life, I had probably forgotten. I did not say anything. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small, heavy, velvet-wrapped box. It was unassuming, dwarfed by the memory of Blake's enormous empty offering. I stood, walked the length of the long table, and placed it in Robert's hand. He looked at the small box, then at me. He knew this was not a last-minute thought. He slowly lifted the lid. The entire table went silent. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark silk, gleamed the clock. It was a 1951 Hamilton community model, the exact one the original developer had mentioned loving as a boy, the one he had lost. It was not new. It was better than new. It was restored. I had sourced the original face which was scratched and buffed the crystal for hours. The movement had been seized with rust. I had spent nearly 3 months of my spare time hunched over my desk with a magnifying lamp and tweezers, cleaning the delicate gears and sourcing a new mainspring from a specialist in Switzerland. Robert did not speak. He just stared at it, his fingers trembling slightly, lifted it from the box. He turned it over, feeling the solid mechanical weight. "Becca," he whispered. His voice was thick. He looked up at me and his eyes were shining with actual unshed tears. In that one look, I saw the man I had been trying to save all these years. The man I respected. The man who was trapped beneath the weight of this board. "Becca," he tried again. "How did you? This is the one. This is his clock." "I know, Robert," I said quietly. "It took a few months to get the parts. But I thought you'd like it." He stood up, ignoring the entire room, and wrapped me in a hug that was so tight it almost hurt. It was the first honest thing I had felt all night. "I love it," he whispered into my hair. "Thank you. Thank you." The room was quiet. The moment was real, palpable. It had broken Karen's carefully constructed script. And Karen despised improvisation. She laughed. It was a light tinkling sound as sharp and cold as breaking glass. "My goodness, Becca, that must have cost a fortune." She paused, letting the word fortune hang in the air, redefining my act of love as a crude financial transaction. She looked around the table, drawing every guest into her confidence, her voice dripping with a sickly theatrical pity. "But then again, when you do not have a husband and you do not have children, I suppose you just have all this extra money to throw around like that." The air in the room suddenly dropped 10 degrees. The guests stared at their plates, their forks, their napkins anywhere but at me. In one perfectly crafted sentence, she had dismissed my gift, my career, and my entire life as a pathetic compensation for being a lonely, barren woman. Robert pulled back, his face white with shock. "Karen," he started, his voice a low warning. "That is not appropriate." "Oh, hush, Robert," she snapped, her smile never wavering. "Becca knows I am just teasing. She has a good sense of humor." I looked at her. The analyst in me was online. The scenario was running. Do not engage emotionally. Do not raise your voice. Stick to the data. I smiled. It was a tight, controlled corporate smile. "It's fine, Robert. I'm happy to spend it on the community." I turned my gaze, cool and direct, to Karen at the head of the table. "After all, I also paid for that $32,000 pool resurfacing for the neighborhood a few years ago. This clock, comparatively, was much less." The data point landed with a dead, heavy thud. Karen's mask of social grace did not just crack. It shattered. The color drained from her face, then rushed back in a hot, mottled, furious red. She had expected tears or silence. She had not expected a public fact check. She had not expected me to bring up the ledger. She slammed her hand flat on the mahogany table. The silver cutlery jumped. "How dare you?" she hissed. The word cut through the room, silencing the last whisper of side conversation. She was on her feet now, her voice rising from a venomous hiss to a sharp, accusing tremor. "How dare you sit at this community gala and keep score?" She pointed a finger at me, her hand shaking. "You throw that in our faces after everything we did for you. You think you can just buy your way into this neighborhood? Is that it, Becca? You buy us a clock. You pay for one pool project. And you think that makes you better than us. You think you can hold this community hostage with your money." I looked at Robert. He was frozen, trapped in his default setting, a silent, miserable spectator in the war between his board and me. Then I looked at the board members. Blake leaned back in his chair, a smug, entertained look on his face. He was swirling the last of the 2019 Cabernet, the expensive $100 a bottle wine I had ordered, the wine I would be paying for in his glass. He was enjoying the show. Todd, unbelievably, had his phone out and was filming this, a faint, cruel smile on his lips, documenting my humiliation for his private collection. They were not just spectators, they were accomplices. They were watching the ATM get audited and they were siding with the bank robbers. That's not what I said. Karen, I said. My voice was impossibly calm. It was the voice I used with volatile clients during a market crash. I just stated a fact. A fact. She was almost shaking with rage. The guests, strangers, Robert's friends were staring, trapped in this vortex of neighborhood horror. You want a fact? Here is a fact. Becca. You fly in here from your big important job in your expensive, empty apartment. You look down your nose at all of us. You buy your way into this community because you have nothing else. She took a deep, ragged breath. She leaned across the table, her eyes glittering with a triumphant, hateful victory. She delivered the killing blow. The one she had been saving, the final loaded bullet. You are not even part of this community. The words just hung there in the thick carpeted $1,000 an hour silence of the clubhouse. You are not even part of this community. And just like that, the fog of 8 long years vaporized. The guilt, the obligation, the shame, the endless grinding weight of being the rescuer. It all dissolved. Ethan Cole had been right. It was not complicated. I looked at them. Karen panting slightly. Victorious. Blake smirking, waiting for me to shatter. Todd, phone still raised. Robert, his head bowed, staring at the clock in his hands. This was not a community. It was a syndicate. An emotionally manipulative, financially parasitic cult of personality. And I was not the neighbor. I was the mark. I was the external funding source. I was the designated ATM. Karen was the CEO running operations. Blake and Todd were her lieutenants, her enforcers. Robert, my father figure, was the hostage, the sympathetic face they used to legitimize the entire sordid operation. And my role was simply to pay for it all. Karen thought her words were an execution. She thought this was the final judgment. The thing that would break me, make me beg for forgiveness, and force me back in line, checkbook in hand. But it was not an execution. It was an emancipation proclamation. It was a severance package. It was the get-out-of-jail-free card I had been too choked with guilt to draw for myself. Because if I am not part of this community, then I have no financial obligations. The logic was as clean and cold as a market analysis. I slowly, carefully folded my linen napkin and placed it on the table next to my plate. I stood up. Karen's triumphant expression flickered, replaced by a shadow of confusion. This was not the part where I cried. "Where are you going?" she demanded. "I am not finished speaking." "Oh, I think you are," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the dead silence. I picked up my purse. I turned my back on the table. I walked past the shocked faces of Robert's friends, past the nervous waiters who were clustered by the service door. I did not run. I walked. I went straight to the reception desk in the main lobby where the clubhouse manager, a polished woman in a black suit, was pretending not to have heard the shouting. "Excuse me," I said. I pulled my black corporate MX card from my wallet. "Ms. Harlan, is everything all right? I need the itemized bill for the Langley party in the Harmony Room." She looked flustered. "Oh, but ma'am, the party is not over. They have not had dessert. It is for me. I am paying for my portion and for Mr. Robert's portion." I had the duck and 1 glass of the Ellerman Cabernet. Robert had the same. I glanced back through the glass door. Blake was now pouring himself and Todd another generous glass of my Cabernet. "Actually," I said, the analyst in me taking over, "this is cleaner. Please charge me for my meal and Robert's meal. Just those 2. And the rest of the party." The manager, visibly relieved, nodded.
Mom.
The other 8 guests. The bottles of wine. I pointed back to the private room where Karen was now hissing something at Robert, who still had his head in his hands. "The rest of the bill," I said. All of it you can send directly to Mrs. Karen Langley. She is the one at the head of the table. She is the host. She is the community. I signed the slip for Robert's meal and mine. I added a very generous 30% tip for the waiter who had been caught in the crossfire. I turned and walked toward the heavy carved oak front doors. As I reached the exit, my phone buried deep in my purse began to buzz. A text. I pulled it out as I stepped into the cold, damp Cedar Grove night. It was from Karen. You selfish little... I pushed open the door. The air hit my face, smelling of rain and the distant, briny scent of the bay. It was the first clean breath I had taken in 8 years. I looked at the string of furious, desperate, grasping messages lighting up my phone. The thin, sharp smile curved my mouth. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of an analyst who had just closed a very bad position and successfully cut her losses. I did not text back. I silenced the ringer, put the phone in my pocket, and kept walking. The walk home was 3 miles. I did not take a cab. I let the cold, damp Cedar Grove air soak through my coat, a physical baptism in reality. My phone, which I had silenced, vibrated incessantly in my pocket. A heavy angry bee against my hip. 27 missed calls from Karen. 15 from Blake. A string of increasingly pathetic, then abusive texts from Todd. I ignored them all. I walked into my apartment, the one Karen called expensive and empty, and dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. The sound echoed in the quiet. I did not turn on the main lights, just the dim under-cabinet lighting in the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, my hand perfectly steady. Then a different notification chimed. A secure message app, not a text. It was from my cousin Renee. Renee was Robert's niece, a quiet software engineer who had escaped Karen's orbit years ago by moving to San Diego. We rarely spoke, but we shared a silent, mutual understanding of the neighborhood's core dynamics. The message was simple. Becca, I heard what happened. I think you need to see this. Below it were 3 screenshots. They were from a private board group chat. A chat I had never been invited to. The name of the group visible at the top made my stomach clench. It was titled Willow Project. I stared at the name Willow Project. I did not understand why Willow. Then it hit me. The saying, the weeping willow. My blood ran cold. They had named their private chat after me. After my perceived weakness. After my function. The one who cries. The one who bends. The one who pays. I read the messages. They were from this afternoon, just hours before the gala. Karen. Becca's quarterly bonus posts next Friday. Robert's anniversary is the perfect time to lay the groundwork. Blake. What's the crisis this time? My landscaping truck needs a new transmission again. Todd. LOL. No. We did truck last quarter. Too obvious. Karen. I'm handling it. Something with the Clubhouse Foundation. An emergency assessment. I'll need $20,000 by the end of the month. Blake. Your job is to soften her up. Remind her she's part of the community. Todd. Just look pathetic and don't talk about your new phone. Blake. Roger. Milking the willow. ETA on the funds. Karen. Give me 48 hours after the party. She'll be feeling guilty for not visiting. She'll pay. I sat down on my cold hardwood floor. The glass of water forgotten. The screenshots burned in my hand. This was not impulsive, chaotic need. This was a structured, premeditated financial strategy. They were a hostile acquisitions team and I was the target asset. Milking the willow. The analyst in me, the woman I had suppressed for 8 years in the name of community, rose up like a tidal wave. The cold, precise, calculating part of my brain took complete control. The shame vanished. The guilt evaporated. All that was left was the ice-cold clarity of a problem to be solved. For the first time, I was grateful for my expensive, empty apartment. It was quiet. It was my command center. I went to my home office, a room that overlooked the dark, choppy waters of the bay. I sat in my ergonomic chair. I turned on my 3 monitors. I did not open the Cedar Grove expense ledger XLSX file. Not yet. That was my summary. I needed the raw data. I logged into my bank. I set the custom date range October 1st, 2016 to tonight, 8 years. I bypassed the summary reports and downloaded the full transaction level statements, 87 PDF files. The work was methodical. It was the same work I did at Pacific Northwest, a forensic audit of a failing company. I opened a new secure spreadsheet. I began to transfer the data line by line. The first withdrawals, the $12,400 for the roof penalty, the $32,000 for the emergency pool, the $20,000 for Blake's mulch startup, the $8,000 for Todd's tuition. But as I dug, I found the ones I had forgotten, the ones I had dismissed as one-offs. The $500 here for a utility bill, the $1,500 there for a dental emergency, the $300 for groceries, $1,000 for a car payment. Blake was just a little short on. It was not a series of major crises. It was a sustained systemic drain. It was a parasitic subscription service I had never agreed to. I printed all 87 pages. I laid them out on my dining room table, overlapping them in chronological order. I went to my desk and got a pack of neon pink sticky notes and a black pen. On each sticky note, I wrote the motive they had given me, cross-referencing my old text messages and emails, which I had never deleted. 1. 500. Blake, urgent landscaping repair. 4,000. Karen, property tax miscalculation. 2,200. Todd, security deposit. My kitchen floor looked like the storyboard for a corporate fraud investigation. The patterns became visible, not as a feeling, but as hard, irrefutable data points. I went back to my laptop. I pulled up my own employment records, my quarterly bonus schedule. The blood drained from my face. 90% of the crises, the emergencies, the desperate, tearful, end-of-the-world phone calls occurred within 5 to 7 business days of my bonus hitting my account every single quarter for 8 years. It was not just predatory, it was disciplined. It was their fiscal calendar. The Willow Project was a long-term strategic plan. I looked at the sticky notes. I cross-referenced the dates with reality. The urgent landscaping repair for Blake. I found a social media post from that same week of him at a high-stakes poker tournament in Reno. The dental emergency for Todd. A new gaming console. The foundation crisis was just a lie. A complete fabrication timed perfectly for tonight. I finally returned to my original spreadsheet, the one I had been too afraid to complete. Cedar Grove expense ledger.xlsx. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitors illuminating my face. My fingers flew across the keyboard, inputting the last of the data, the small transactions I had overlooked. I clicked on cell J52, the cell with the sum formula. I hit enter. The number that appeared was not 72,000. My soft estimate, the one I had held in my head, was a lie I had told myself to stay sane. The number was $89,531.48. Not a single cent of it repaid. Not a single loan document signed. It was just gone. I did not cry. I did not feel anger. I felt a profound, chilling quiet. It was the quiet of a market after a crash. When all the noise and panic have ceased and all that is left is the wreckage and the cold, hard numbers. I took a deep breath and then I acted. My phone was still vibrating on the kitchen counter. I picked it up. I opened Karen's contact. I scrolled to the bottom. I pressed block this caller. I confirmed. I opened Blake's contact. Block this caller. Confirmed. I opened Todd's contact. Block this caller. Confirmed. I went to Robert's contact. My hand hovered. He was the hostage, but he was also a willing participant. His silence was his signature on every fraudulent transaction. He was the why. He was the collateral damage I was inflicting upon myself. I left his line open, but I changed his ringtone to silent one in case of a true verifiable life or death emergency. But I would not be at his beck and call. The silence in my apartment was absolute. No buzzing, no angry bee. I went back to my laptop. I opened a web browser. I typed in Douro Valley, Portugal. It was the trip I was planning 8 years ago before the roof crisis. The trip I had postponed for Blake's startup. The trip I had canceled for Todd's DUI. A 10-day trip focused on vineyards, river cruises, and quiet. I found a non-stop flight from Seattle, leaving in 3 weeks. I booked it. Business class. Non-refundable. I booked a room at the Six Senses, the most expensive, beautiful hotel in the valley. I paid for it in full. Then I opened another tab. I searched for therapists. Cedar Grove, financial abuse, neighborhood systems. A name appeared, Dr. Lorna Vale. She had a PhD specialized in CPTSD and high-functioning individuals with boundary issues. Her office was downtown, 3 blocks from Pacific Northwest. I filled out her new client intake form. Under reason for seeking therapy, I wrote, I need to establish and enforce boundaries with my HOA who have been financially and emotionally exploiting me for 8 years. I need to dismantle the rescuer role. I hit submit. An automated reply confirmed an appointment for next Tuesday. Finally, I took the screenshots Renee had sent me. Willow Project. Milking the Willow. I uploaded them to my most secure cloud server, the one I used for my personal financial documents. I encrypted the folder. I set a complex 20-character password that had nothing to do with the neighborhood. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. I had been working for 4 hours. I had dismantled the lie. I had documented the fraud. I had cut off their access. I had booked my escape. I had scheduled my recovery. I shut down my monitors one by one. I walked to my bedroom, the apartment dark and silent. I undressed and slipped into bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the rain tapping against my window. For the first time in my adult life, I was not worried about their next call. I was not bracing for the next crisis. The Bank of Becca was closed. The account was frozen, pending a full audit and restructuring. File 5, word count, 1,000.